I've been accused of being too accessible or being facile because, art to be good has to carry the sort of arcana of knowledge that is inaccessible for the person. See, I'm totally against that. It's very easy to speak to the erudite. The same way it's very easy to speak to somebody who doesn't know anything about a certain subject. But to speak to both simultaneously, it's a very, very tricky task. And I think an artist who doesn't aim to do this is not being very ambitious. Photography is the medium that has informed me and gave me the greater amount of extensions, that I can think of, is how I got to know the world in my time, in my lifetime. And obviously, if I have to meditate upon or create a reflection of this world, I prefer to work with a medium that actually allow me to see this world in the first place. I myself lived in military dictatorship when I was growing up, and I think that left a profound mark in the way I see things. In a dictatorship, you cannot say what you want to say the way you want to say. You have to resort to really crafty metaphors, and sometimes you become very aware of the mechanics of communication, how you can, the power of images, the power of messages. Although I was born in Brazil, my artistic influences are mainly from Europe and the United States from the time that I started learning visual culture. So 60s and 70s art is very, very big for me, especially minimalism. When I'm saying always about this, art as being these tools that we developed to deal with the dichotomy of mind and matter between consciousness and phenomenon, I find it in minimalism a really basic and beautiful poetics of this equation, because you have form and mass and you have concept. And these two things struggle to be one part of another. And I find it's almost an impossible struggle. And I've always been very, very inspired by it. I'm very aware of the mental image. So therefore, I chose to use icons, archetypes, poster store iconography. That I relate very much to these things, because you're being very aware and respectful to the baggage that the viewer brings into the encounter with the artwork. When the viewer looks at one of my pictures, and this is the kind of interaction that I expect him or her to have, it will immediately see something that he thinks he's seen it before. But upon close inspection, he or she will realize that it's something else. And the gap between the mental image and the novel image that is slightly different than the one before is a whole universe for you to think about images and how you see them and how you think about them. I think the difference between an image that can be considered artistic, lies in the fact that that image inspires you to think about how you see other images. I think different artworks mark, in a seminal way, the history of the way we see things, the history of visuality. I tend to identify them for very specific reasons. Sometimes they appear based on a specific context that I'm working with, based on the series. Like when I did the pictures of color, which were pictures made out of pigments, I did a lot of Impressionism and Gauguin and Van Gogh, because you have, that was the point of those paintings being made. And then when I worked on different media like magazines, I went on to things that were more modern. When I worked with just pure black and white paper, I chose to work with photographs, the history of photography, because the century that I was born, the century that gave me the formative information towards the world that I live in it today, it was acquired without colors. Most of the images that made my sense of reality around me were black and white. I'm not an appropriation artist, because I'm not saying that image is mine. Always give due credit to it. And I am a copyist. I'm just saying that what I'm doing is a mere copy of that original. And Most important is the reason I'm copying it is because I find it relevant, important, and best of all, because I really like it. I normally like to work with material that people have seen a lot, that are people have already an opinion, they have already a memory of it. Works that if I just say the name of the work, like Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh, the picture comes in your head, and then I have something that I can work with. The way I work with collage, I've always been a mosaic artist. I always try to make things that have a relationship between the parts and the whole. The idea of a mosaic is quite interesting because you have both image and material trying to fight one another. Because it's not just a material that's fluid, that is like something that like pencil or ink. They're pieces of things. And when they have fragments with a certain identity to them, a certain form, a certain shape, and that creates a tension between the material and the subject. And I think that's very healthy when you look at any image. You look at it and you're not only seeing an image, something mental, but you're seeing a material counterpart to it. So you know not only what it's made of, but you can think about how it was made. Any relevant concept of reality, we have to think of process. There's no other way around it. There is a series called The Best of Life, in which I try to reproduce by drawing some of the most iconic images, like from the Best of Life, the book, of Life magazine. Try to remember what these Pulitzer Prize winning pictures look like, because they're part of the collective consciousness. But then you know these images, but why do you buy the book to look at them again and again, the same way you look at a family album? At that moment, I developed this idea of the image within. That we have an image inside of us that we're always comparing to something that is outside. That moment too, it catalyzed in my mind the idea of the importance of looking at art as this interface between mind and matter, between consciousness and phenomenon. One particularity of the digital age is all this information that's inside, the visual information that we acquire. We don't have space anymore. So what we have heaps and heaps of visual garbage. And it's becoming increasingly difficult to actually pull things to the foreground. And that idea between foreground and background, and the confusion that it is to actually try to concentrate in a single image right now at this point in history, prompted me to think of create images that were very similar to the way we imagined them when we're not looking at them. So the first attempt was to make pictures with magazines. So I was tapping the idea of a collective visual world, the things that are still printed and disseminated, probably the last things that will be printed and disseminated. So I had to work with them. Later on, I thought about something that was not collective, but personal. I own a collection of about 250,000 family pictures, and I've been collecting it for 20 years. I get them from eBay, I get them from garage sales. They always tell the same stories, the baby picture, and then the school picture, and then the first communion or bar mitzvah, and then the vacation, and then there's like a wedding of the kids, the empty nest Esther vacation, and so on, and then they stop somewhere. The only thing that changes are the protagonists and the scenario, but the story is always the same. It's just one life. And it's punctuated always by the same pictures, which makes you think that one thing that punctuate the rhythm of our lives is also the advent of photography. So I thought about what these pictures meant. So I decided to do a series called Album. They had all these pictures. I never had a photography class in my entire life, but every single thing that I learned from looking at family pictures. I went on to do things that had to do with points, like little dots. I think that came from my familiarity with the photographic medium. And the Sugar Children come around that time, which is not only in negative, it's white on black, because I was working with negatives, but also you're dealing with crystals which is basically what a silver print is. It's just silver crystals all over an emulsion surface. I did pictures also with soil over a light background. They're called pictures of soil. And I went on until I started exploring even different ways, more complex ways to slow the interpretation of an image that is very familiar to the viewer. You insert ideas that appeal to other senses, such as flavor. I thought of chocolate because chocolate is a very complex substance. It is a cultural invention as much as it is an industrial invention. And when you render anything out of chocolate, you short-circuit its meaning. This is a series that is very seminal to my way of experimenting with subjects and materials. It was a way for me to try how much and to what degree a subject drawn in a very complex substance, how much this substance, the material, affects the rendering of that particular subject. Another series that I can think of as being extremely important, is a very small series, it's just a couple of pieces called Equivalence. And they were like cotton clouds. What they are, it's actually something very silly. It's just, it just made a cloud that looked just like something. But and it's just, it looks like a snail, and it may look like a guy rowing a kayak. It looks like three things simultaneously. But you cannot see the three notions at the same time. You have to choose. This is what we call a multi-stable image. It's an image that can be read in different ways, specifically. Like it's like the vase with the silhouettes in it, or the necker cube that you can see the cube one way or another. But when you use photography, you're dealing with a different level of reality and confidence and faith and belief that also you have to revisit even those notions that are gestalt and image completion, image continuity. I'm very fond of those series because it enables the viewer to know how much he controls of the reading of every image and how much subjectivity lies within an image, no matter how simple it is. There's a famous slogan by J. Ayer that actually managed to save the diamond industry, which is, I think, the best advertising slogan before "just do it," is "diamonds are forever." It associated it with eternity. And I kept thinking, what would be the visual equivalent of eternity? Would be the diva, the Hollywood icon. So I decided to do the most predictable thing, to do Hollywood divas with diamonds. And it was a great success as far as sales go, because when people buy a picture, they think they're buying what's in the picture. So they were buying photographs as if they were diamonds. And I felt so ashamed, that I had to do a counter part to it. And I went, what would be the opposite of a diamond diva? That's what the series was called. I said, I have to draw with something that is changing, or it's about to becoming something. It's in constant change. And eggs would be something good. They're hatching. They're like, you don't know what, the idea of an egg that you don't know of what is terrifying, because you don't know what's coming out of it, And I thought, but it has to be chic, like diamonds, so I made it caviar. And what is fascinating, because it doesn't have a specific identity, or it's changing into something you don't know, a monster. So, and I used the same iconography that I used for the divas, and I made these caviar monsters. I used to do all the process, and once the image was done, that was the end of it. Only recently, I started working with inkjet. And that allowed me to actually work on something, reprint. And it gave me the freedom to actually start messing around the surface of the image. So once you have a photograph, the work continues. So what I do, I've been cutting holes and adding things to photographs, and then I rephotograph them and I reprint them. So that allows me to work like a painter, but I'm working at the same time on a surface, but I'm working in time. I have several generations of images. It's allowing me to work simultaneously as a painter, a sculptor, and a photographer, while allowing me to do also something that I always wanted to do, which is to do abstract art. I call it epistems, because they're epistemological exercises. Well, I think every picture is an exercise in visual epistemology. I think art is political to the extent that prepares people to deal with information. In that respect, I think I am a political artist because I'm dealing with enabling people to understand things with more clarity so they can make better choices.